A banquet in turmoil dusk soaked into the glass dome of the Duke of Lancaster's mansion, crystal chandeliers casting dappled gold light onto the dance floor. Adrian leaned against the crimson velvet curtains, his cold gaze fixed on the slender figure in the center of the dance floor. His new wife, Eleanor, surrounded by laughing noblemen, her fingers clutching her skirt, trembled slightly, her timid appearance prompting a sneer to his lips. A sparrow from the slums, does it deserve to stand under the crown of Lancaster? He whispered to the servant, his voice piercing her eardrums. Eleanor's shoulders trembled violently, her porcelain cheeks flushing red, like a sparrow drenched in rain. Behind the hidden compartment, a pair of deep, dark eyes peered through the crack, taking in everything. The real Eleanor Cadenimed, the Queen of Shadows, was tracing the patterns on her sapphire brooch with her fingertips. Sebastian whispered in her ear, "The secret passage map has been embedded in the council invitation. It will be delivered to the new king's confidant tonight." She scoffed, looking down at the arrogant figure below. 3 months ago, when she knelt before the carriage as a bullied orphan, the hunt had already quietly turned around. A commotion erupted downstairs. Adrian stepped forward, his imposing presence guiding her away from the crowd as he led her toward the quiet terrace. "You are quite the actor," he whispered coldly, his sharp gaze locking onto her under the moonlight, his cold gaze locking onto her on the terrace. "Tell me who sent you to approach me." His posture was unyielding, parsing her expressions for any sign of deceit. Eleanor suppressed her racing heart, feigning terror and tears. "My lord, you frighten me." Tears dripped onto his sleeve, and with a subtle, practiced flick of her fingers, she unhooked a hidden catch on his cufflinks. Adrian recoiled in surprise as the metal clattered to the floor. The shadowy figure in the hidden compartment curled her lips into a smile. The game of wits had begun, and the hunter was already losing his ground. As the clock struck 12 at midnight, the hustle and bustle of the Duke of Lancaster's mansion finally subsided. Under the guise of changing clothes, Eleanor slipped away from the night patrol and silently slipped behind the huge oil painting in the study. With a soft click of a mechanism turning, the heavy bookshelf moved aside, revealing a deep, secret passage leading underground. There is no feminine scent of a ball here. Only the smell of old paper and dried herbs. In the dark room at the end of the secret passage, candlelight flickered. Sebastian, dressed in black, stood like a statue in the shadows. Seeing Eleanor enter, he immediately knelt on one knee, his voice extremely low. "Your Excellency, we have obtained the list from the council." Eleanor walked to the table, her fingertips tracing the yellowed parchment. Her previously gentle and timid eyes instantly sharpened into something piercing. She sneered, "Adrian thinks he can cut off our supplies just by blockading the port. How adorably naive! And this too." Sebastian handed over a small silver whistle. "This is the token to mobilize the city defense forces. Just give the order." "Shh." Eleanor put her index finger to her lips, a playful smile curving her lips. "It is not time to close the net yet. I want to see Adrian push himself off the cliff at the height of his triumph. Only that kind of despair from falling from the clouds is worthy of the arrogance of the Lancaster family." She turned and walked toward the hidden compartment, intending to hide the list inside. Just as her hand touched the mechanism of the compartment, a very soft gasp, like that of a startled animal, came from behind her. Eleanor's muscles tensed instantly as she whirled around, the silver whistle already slipping into her palm, ready to be thrown as a weapon at any moment. "Who?" In a dimly lit corner, a small head peeked out from behind a huge oak barrel. It was a boy of about 5 or 6 years old, dressed in an exquisite silk nightgown, clutching a one-eyed teddy bear tightly in his arms. He had soft blonde hair and deep blue eyes just like Adrian's. It is Charles Jr., Adrian's illegitimate son who has never appeared in public. The air seemed to freeze. She slowly squatted down, her gaze level with the boy's. Charles. She called his name softly, her voice filled with a soothing warmth. This is a special midnight adventure, like a secret alliance in a storybook, isn't it? Charles blinked, the confusion in his eyes fading slightly. An adventure. Sebastian silently stepped back into the deepest shadows, ensuring the passage remained secure, awaiting Eleanor's guidance. According to their code, every variable required careful handling. Looking into those clear and innocent eyes, Eleanor let go of her defensive stance. She slowly squatted down, her gaze level with the boy's. Charles. She called his name softly, her voice filled with a soothing warmth. This is a special midnight adventure. Like a secret alliance in a storybook, isn't it? Charles blinked, the confusion in his eyes fading slightly. An adventure. Yes. Eleanor reached out and gently smoothed his messy bangs. Her fingertips touched the child's warm forehead, and a strange tenderness welled up in her heart. But this game is dangerous. If Daddy or other bad people find out, you won't be able to play anymore. Can you keep this a secret for Auntie? Charles nodded, as if he understood, and held up his little finger. Pinky promise. Eleanor paused for a moment, then reached out and hooked her finger around the small, tender hand. Pinky promise. Just then, heavy footsteps and the guard's whispers came from the entrance of the secret passage. Over there, I hear a sound. Sebastian's eyes sharpened. Sir, let's go. Take the alternate exit. Eleanor quickly bent down, giving Charles a reassuring smile and tapping his teddy bear's nose. The castle guards are joining our midnight game, little knight, she whispered with a warm, playful tone. Hide in your fortress behind the barrel and wait for the morning bell to announce your victory. Charles nodded happily, shrinking back into the blind spot not out of fear, but with the excitement of a grand playful challenge. Charles obediently shrank into the blind spot behind the wine barrel. Eleanor turned to Sebastian, her eyes instantly turning cold. Make some noise to distract them. Don't hurt anyone unless absolutely necessary. Yes. Eleanor glanced at the corner one last time, then turned and disappeared into the dark passageway. The instant she vanished, several guards carrying torches rushed into the dark room. Who goes there? Sebastian whistled, and several startled bats flew overhead, causing a commotion. Taking advantage of the guard's confusion, he vanished like a ghost into the ventilation shaft on the other side. The dark room fell silent. Once more, after a long while, Charles finally crawled out from the corner. He walked to the table and picked up a sapphire cufflink that Eleanor had accidentally dropped. It was the one she wore when dressed as a man. The boy gripped his cufflinks tightly, staring at the empty secret passage, a complex expression on his youthful face that seemed incongruous with his age. Deep within the secret passage, Eleanor leaned against the cold stone wall, panting heavily. She touched her chest, which was pounding violently, not only because of the danger she had just experienced, but also because of the child's last look. Those were Adrian's eyes. Yet, they held the innocence Adrian had long since lost. She cursed under her breath, shoving the list into her coat. Now the game is even more chaotic. The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting dappled shadows on the long dining table. But it couldn't dispel the heavy chill in the air. Adrian sat at the end of the long table, his long, slender fingers tapping absently on his silver knife and fork, producing a crisp, subdued sound. His gaze wasn't on the exquisite breakfast before him, but rather fixed on Eleanor, who sat opposite him, head down, cutting a boiled egg. "Did you sleep well last night, darling?" he suddenly asked, his voice low and unreadable. Eleanor paused almost imperceptibly in her movements, then looked up, revealing the docile and timid smile she had practiced countless times. "Thanks to you, Your Grace. It is just, there seem to be some rats making noise at night, which is quite unsettling." "Rats?" Adrian raised an eyebrow, a playful smile curving his lips. Lanchester House is heavily guarded. Not even a fly can get in. Where would rats come from, unless it's some kind of more cunning, more camouflaged creature? Just then, Charles, clutching his teddy bear, appeared with a cheerful smile at the restaurant entrance. Upon seeing his father and Eleanor, his eyes lit up with joy as he skipped towards the table. Adrian's expression softened into genuine warmth, and he beckoned his son to sit beside him. "Come here, Charles." "Good morning, father." Adrian's expression softened, and he beckoned his son to sit beside him. "Come here, Charles. Where did you go last night? I've been looking for you for ages." Charles glanced furtively at Eleanor across from him. He pulled the sapphire cufflink from his pocket, placed it on the table, and whispered, "I found this while playing hide-and-seek in the study." The moment Adrian's gaze fell upon the cufflink, his previously languid expression froze. He picked up the cufflink, his fingertips tracing the unique family crest on it. It was something he had lost during a secret operation, something that could never have ended up in his study, much less have been found by a delicate woman. He slowly raised his head, his gaze locking onto Eleanor like that of a hawk. "Eleanor, do you recognize this?" Eleanor's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly feigned a confused expression. "Is this yours? It looks very valuable. I've never seen anything like it before." "Really?" Adrian stood up, walked around the table, and came behind her. He leaned down, his warm breath brushing against her ear with a suffocating pressure. "But why do I feel that the pattern on this matches the necklace you wore last night? They're both dark blue." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. He was testing her. Although she had changed her clothes in the secret room last night, she had indeed worn a sapphire necklace as a disguise to avoid being seen. "It is just a coincidence, sir." She forced herself to remain calm, picking up a napkin to gently wipe her mouth. "Sapphire is a popular style this year, isn't it?" "It's certainly popular." Adrian chuckled, stepping closer until his deep gaze completely locked her in place, making it impossible for her to evade his eyes. He leaned down, his shadow enveloping her completely, his hand resting on the back of her chair with a subtle, tense restraint. "Or do you already know that there is a key pattern inside?" These words struck Eleanor like a thunderbolt. She suddenly realized this was an elaborate trap. He had not only discovered the cufflinks, but might even have suspected the secret passage. "I don't understand what you are saying." Her voice trembled. Her eyes instantly reddened, and tears welled up in her eyes, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. "Are you doubting me? Doubting that a wife from a humble family like me would know anything about secret passages or keys?" This tactic of feigning retreat proved effective. Looking at her pitiful appearance, Adrian's suspicion lessened slightly. But his wariness remained. That would be for the best. He released his grip, casually tossing the cufflink into the coffee cup in front of him with a dull thud. After all, the Lanchester family hates deception the most. He turned and walked toward the door, his back to her, and said coldly, "There is a royal ball tonight. Remember to wear that red dress. I want to see if my rat wife will show her tail under the spotlight." The door slammed shut. Eleanor slumped in her chair, her back soaked with cold sweat. She stared at the murky coffee, a glint of ruthlessness flashing in her eyes. The probing has only just begun. And this cufflink will be the first bullet in her counterattack. As night fell, the royal crystal chandelier illuminated the ballroom as if it were daytime. The moment Eleanor appeared at the top of the stairs, the once noisy hall fell silent for a moment. She wore a scarlet, backless gown, its color so intense it glowed like a burning ruby, gleaming brilliantly under the warm lights. The silk clung to her slender waist, the hem spreading out like a blooming spider lily. This was not the timid duchess she usually was, but a poisonous rose with thorns. Adrian stood in the center of the crowd, swirling a glass of red wine. A fleeting look of amazement crossed his eyes at the sight before being replaced by a deep gloom. This red dress was something he had deliberately sent to her room as a form of humiliation, intended to mock her as a plaything who had risen to power through her beauty. But he hadn't expected her to actually dare to wear it, and to wear it so stunningly. Is that the Duchess of Lancaster? My God, she looks like a queen. Whispers spread through the crowd. Just then, the royal steward's high-pitched voice pierced through the crowd. By His Majesty the King's decree, the opening dance tonight will be led by the Duke and Duchess of Lancaster. The crowd parted automatically to make way. This was both a royal decree and a death warrant. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, if Eleanor made a mistake in her dance steps, it would be a disgrace to the Duke's mansion. If she performed too well, it would invite the royal family to investigate her past. Adrian put down his wine glass, strode over to her, and extended his hand in a gentlemanly manner, but a cold smile played on his lips. Madam, please, don't disappoint me. Eleanor placed her hand in his broad palm, her fingertips icy cold. She looked up, met his eyes, and said in a voice only the two of them could hear, "As long as your grace keeps up, I won't step on your feet." The music started. It was a very fast-paced waltz. Adrian's movements were swift and demanding. Each spin became a silent duel of wits. His hand rested firmly on her waist, guiding her with a tense authority, his sharp gaze attempting to capture the slightest ripple in her calm composure. You made the right choice. Eleanor used his momentum against him, lightly touching the ground with her toes and gracefully dodging his grip, then pressing herself against his chest. Just like the way you chose to test me, it's so direct, it's almost boring. Adrian's eyes sharpened, and his steps abruptly shifted from a waltz to a more complex tango. This was a code dance step commonly used within the military advance, retreat, lockstep, pause. He asked, "Who are you?" Eleanor's pupils contracted slightly. She hadn't expected him to interrogate her in this way in this setting. She had to answer, and with the same dance steps, she took a deep breath, her body instantly relaxing. Following his guidance, she performed an extremely difficult backbend, her red dress cascading down like a waterfall. At the moment their bodies were almost parallel, she lightly tapped his chest 3 times with her fingers. 2 long taps and 1 short tap. That was the Nightingale, organization's highest level response code. I am your shadow. Adrian abruptly pulled her up, their bodies pressed tightly together. A shadow. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, then turned into a deeper inquiry. A shadow cannot exist without its original form. You'd better pray that you really are. Of course. Eleanor twirled and slipped a tiny folded note into the hidden pocket of his tuxedo, so fast that an observer could barely see it. Just like you can't live without my loyalty. The music stopped abruptly. At its climax, Eleanor came to a steady stop in front of him, her chest rising and falling slightly, her cheeks flushed from the exertion, and her eyes gleaming with cunning and defiance. The entire audience erupted in thunderous applause. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time felt a panic that threatened to overwhelm him. The chemistry and skill this woman displayed on the dance floor were far beyond what an orphan country girl could possess. Who was she? Not bad, he commented coldly, his hand unconsciously pressing against the note on his chest. Thank you for the compliment. Eleanor gave an elegant bow, then turned and walked towards the rest area, leaving him with only her aloof back. However, Your Grace, your heart skipped a beat just now. Was it because the dance steps were too difficult, or because you were afraid? Adrian stood there, watching her retreating figure, his fingers touching the note. He quietly unfolded a corner. It contained only 1 line. The picture in the cufflink is fake. The real entrance to the secret passage is behind the deer hunting painting in your study. He looked up abruptly, only to find that Eleanor had disappeared into the crowd, leaving only that scarlet afterimage, like a huge exclamation capture imprinted on his retina. Chapter 5. The Price of Lies. The study door was slammed shut, cutting off the last ray of light from the corridor. Adrian didn't light a lamp. Only the dying embers in the fireplace cast a dim, reddish glow, stretching his shadow long and ghostly. He stood before the huge painting of the deer hunt on the wall, the stag being mauled by hunting dogs in the painting, having a desperate and empty look in its eyes, as if foreshadowing something. The real entrance to the secret passage is behind the painting. Hunting deer in your study. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind like a spell. He took a deep breath, placed his hand on the edge of the picture frame, and rotated it 3 times to the left, and then 2 times to the right, following the directions indicated on the note. Click! A dull thud sounded as the picture frame slowly slid open, revealing a deep, dark hole behind it. A chilly, stale breeze carrying the scent of old dust and faded ink wafted out. Adrian gripped the candlestick in his hand and went inside. This is not a secret room for hiding military funds, nor is it a repository of evidence of treason. It is small and cramped, with only a dilapidated wooden table and walls covered with photos and newspaper clippings. He raised the candlestick and brought it close to the wall. In that instant, he felt as if all the blood in his body had frozen. The walls were covered with the names and portraits of prominent figures who had vanished from the political arena over the past 7 years. The walls were covered with an intricate historical chart of the past 7 years. It recorded the names of former council members and lords who had quietly dissolved from the political arena, some losing their titles in sudden economic downfalls, others choosing permanent reclusion after failed alliances. Beneath each prominent title, a golden balance mark was drawn, signifying a calculated ledger of political debts that Adrian had owed to history. In the center of these photos is a yellowed old newspaper with a shocking headline: The Lanchester Family, Illegitimate Child Mystery. The covered truth. Adrian's hands began to tremble. He recognized the handwriting. This was not merely a record. It was a trial. He found a thick black notebook on the table. There was no name on the cover, only a gold-embossed symbol, the shape of the sapphire brooch Eleanor had worn that evening, and also the symbol of the Nightingale organization. He turned to the first page with trembling hands. 7th year of Regency. March target: Adrian Lanchester. Status under observation. 7th year of Regency. June objective: remove obstacles executor actress. Result: the adjutant has been dealt with, and the Duke has no suspicions. Adrian felt as if there was a wad of cotton stuck in his throat, and the suffocating sensation made it almost impossible for him to breathe. It turns out that those accidents he thought were plots by political enemies were actually her doing. No, that is not right. He continued turning the pages until the last one. The ink there was still fresh, clearly written recently. 7th year of Regency, October. Target: Adrian Lanchester. Status: closing the net plan. Use the cufflink mystery to drive him to a mental breakdown, then lure him into the secret room. When he sees this list, he will think he has everything under control, when in reality he has already stepped into the grave I have prepared for him. Note: he thought I was the Nightingale, seeking revenge. But he didn't know that the real Nightingale had died in that fire 7 years ago. I am merely using her name to reap this man's soul. Smack! The candlestick slipped from his hand, rolled on the ground, and splattered wax all over the floor. Adrian staggered backward, knocking over a chair. She wasn't there to help him, nor was she some kind of messenger of justice. She was a hunter far more ruthless than him. She exploited his suspicions, his fears, and even his guilt over the illegitimate child, leading him step by step into this abyss. This list is not evidence of guilt, but a death warrant. You've finally arrived. A soft voice sounded at the door of the secret room. Adrian turned around abruptly. Eleanor stood barefoot in the shadows, wearing a white nightgown. She hadn't turned on the light, but her eyes shone brightly in the darkness, carrying a condescending compassion. "Do you like the gift I prepared for you, your grace?" she smiled, toying with the sapphire cufflink in her hand. "This is the real deer hunt, only this time the deer is you and the hunter is me." Adrian wanted to roar, to step forward and completely shatter her calm, condescending illusions, but he found his legs as heavy as lead. Every name on that list felt like a mountain pressing down on his pride and making it hard to breathe. "Why?" He squeezed out the words through clenched teeth. "Because of the price." Eleanor entered the secret chamber, picked up the candlestick on the ground and relit it. The firelight illuminated her beautiful face and also the unfathomable coldness in her eyes. "You have told too many lies for power now. It's time to pay the price for those lies." She leaned closer to him and whispered in his ear, "Now, you have two choices. Either take this list and turn yourself in, ruining your reputation, or what? Either become my puppet, just like you once manipulated those people." Adrian looked at her, and for the first time, he felt a chill run down his spine in front of this woman. He thought he was the Duke in control of the whole situation, but he never imagined that he was just a pawn on her chessboard, ready to be sacrificed at any moment. The darkness before dawn is the thickest, and the air in the study seems to have solidified into a solid block of lead. Adrian stared at the flickering flames in the fireplace, the orange-red light reflecting an almost insane chill in his deep blue pupils. The black notebook in his hand was heavy, like a bomb that could explode at any moment. It contained all his sins of the past 7 years, and Eleanor, or rather, the actress. The fatal manipulation she had exerted on him. "Burn it!" Eleanor's voice came from the shadows, as calm as if she were discussing the weather. "Burn it, and we'll be even. Or rather, we're just getting started." Adrian's fingers traced the rough cover, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. His pride screamed, urging him to throw the woman into the fire or smash this notebook in her face. But he was a politician, a duke navigating the vortex of power struggles. He knew better than anyone that if this list were to leak, the Lancaster family's century-long glory would be reduced to ashes. He raised his head, his gaze passing over the flickering flames, and for the first time truly examined the woman before him. She was no longer the timid, poor girl, nor the stunning red-clad enchantress who captivated the dance floor, but a devil who was his equal. "You win, Eleanor." His voice was hoarse, with a metallic quality. The next second, he abruptly threw the notebook in his hand into the fireplace. Boom! The dry paper was instantly engulfed by the flames, the blackened cover curled and charred, and the words recording death and conspiracy turned to flying ashes in the fire. The firelight reflected on the two men's faces, cutting their expressions in a flickering light, like two sculptures crawling out of hell. Eleanor watched the list vanish into thin air, a complex light flashing in her eyes. She had gambled correctly. This man's arrogance was his weakness, but his will to survive and his greed for power were the sharpest knives in her hand. It's not just about winning. She walked to the fireplace, stretched out her hand, and felt the scorching intensity. It's about rebirth. From this moment on, the Duke of Lancaster is no longer that fool who only solves problems with brute force. She turned around, leaning against the scorching fireplace, and parted her red lips slightly. "I am no longer the shadow that needs to hide in the dark." Adrian stood up and stepped forward, his cold gaze finally meeting hers on an equal footing. He raised his hand, gesturing with calm respect, matching her unyielding posture. "Since we're accomplices," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room, "I don't like being kept in the dark." Eleanor did not back down, her eyes flashing with a defiant spark, her hand resting gracefully on the table as she offered a subtle nod of alliance. Just then, there was a gentle knock on the study door. "Father," Aunt Eleanor. The childish voice was like a thunderclap, cleaving through the ambiguous and tense atmosphere in the room. Adrian paused, the madness in his eyes vanishing instantly, replaced by a deep melancholy. He released Eleanor, straightened his disheveled collar, and resumed his aloof dukely demeanor. "Come in." The door opened, and Charles, still clutching the one-eyed teddy bear tightly in his arms, stood timidly in the doorway, wearing his oversized pajamas. His gaze swept over the mess on the floor and the still burning ashes in the fireplace, finally settling on Eleanor. There was a sharpness in the boy's eyes beyond his years. He saw the lingering sharpness in Eleanor's eyes, and he also saw the unprecedented oppressive aura emanating from his father. "I had a nightmare," Charles said softly, his eyes fixed on Eleanor's hand, where she was still clutching the sapphire cufflink. Eleanor's heart tightened. How much had this child seen? Adrian walked over, knelt down, and met his son's gaze. Instead of coldly dismissing the child as usual, he reached out and gently tidied his son's messy bangs. The movement was awkward and stiff, yet it made Charles's eyes widen in surprise. "Nightmares are all fake, Charles." Adrian walked over and sat beside his son. He reached out and gently tidied his son's hair. "The shadows of the night are just stories, Charles. In this house, Aunt Eleanor and I will always ensure your safety. Rest well." Charles nodded, feeling a newfound sense of protection wrapping around the grand estate. "Go to sleep." Adrian patted his son on the shoulder. "Tomorrow, I'll hire a new tutor for you." Charles obediently turned and left, but as he closed the door, he glanced back. The door closed. In the gentle firelight of the fireplace, Eleanor and Adrian stood together, their shadows blending into the silhouette of two guardians watching over the newly born dawn of the estate. The door closed. Adrian stood up, walked to the window, and drew back the heavy curtains. Outside, the first rays of dawn pierced the darkness, illuminating the gray London sky. "The royal envoy will be here this afternoon," he said with his back to Eleanor, his tone regaining its usual coldness and calculation. "They want to see me make a fool of myself, to see me overwhelmed by that bastard. Since we're going to form an alliance, let's give them a big gift." Eleanor walked behind him, looking out at the city gradually awakening, a cruel smile curling at the corner of her lips. "Of course." She slid a delicate letter opener from her sleeve, twirling it deftly between her fingers. "The prey is in the net. Now it's time to reap the harvest." On this morning, the Duke of Lancaster's mansion was no longer a home, but a newly built fortress. And atop those ruins, two masked monsters were formally crowned. The midday sun pierced through the crystal dome of the Duke's banquet hall, illuminating the magnificent space with breathtaking detail. The arrival of the royal envoy cast a tense, oppressive atmosphere over this usually austere residence for the first time. Adrian stood at the end of the long table, his fingertips casually tapping on a silver candlestick, while Eleanor sat beside him, her long flowing black dress like the night itself, the sapphire brooch around her neck gleaming with a deep blue light in the candlelight. The token of nightingale. Sir Henry, the royal envoy, strolled slowly toward the two men, his hawk-like gaze sweeping over Eleanor's face. "The Duchess is becoming more and more radiant these days, which reminds me of the nightingale who stunned everyone at the court ball 7 years ago." He deliberately emphasized the last few words, the red wine in his glass swirling slightly, creating an eerie ripple in the candlelight. Eleanor's fingers tightened abruptly, her nails digging deep into her palms. 7 years ago, that name, like a curse, instantly brought back the great fire that had consumed the true Nightingale, and her own rebirth from the ashes. She took a deep breath and offered a flawless smile. "Sir, you jest. Lady Nightingale has long since passed away, who in this London does not know." Sir Henry chuckled softly, then suddenly slammed his wineglass down on the table, spilling red wine that stained the tablecloth a dark crimson. "But I have clearly heard that in the Duke's study there is a list that could bring the Lanchester family to their doom." His gaze was like a knife, piercing Adrian's heart. Adrian's pupils contracted slightly, and his fingers tightened subtly within his sleeve. He knew all too well that the list had been burned to ashes the previous night. But Henry's appearance now clearly indicated he had come prepared. He was about to speak when Eleanor suddenly chuckled, her red lips parting slightly. "Sir, you are overthinking it. If such evidence truly existed, why bother with this arduous test? Wouldn't it be more straightforward to present it directly to His Majesty?" Sir Henry's face darkened. He hadn't expected this woman to be so astute. Just as he was about to retaliate, Eleanor suddenly stood up and walked slowly towards the grandfather clock in the center of the hall. She reached out and lightly flicked the pendulum, producing a crisp click. Impression. With a soft click, the heavy mahogany panels slid back to reveal rows of silver vaults containing sealed official documents and confessions. "Sir," Eleanor turned with a victor's smile. "Behold, this is the true secret of Lanchester House." Meanwhile, Charles remained safely in the peaceful garden outside, completely shielded from the political storms of adults, happily picking daisies under the watchful protection of the royal tutors. "This..." Sir Henry recoiled in shock, nearly knocking over his wine glass. Eleanor turned, a victor's smile on her face. "Sir," she said, "behold, this is the true secret of Lanchester House." She clapped her hands, and the royal attendants immediately brought forward the intercepted secret ledger containing the signatures of his hidden agents. Sir Henry was struck dumb, staggering backward. He then realized that he had fallen into an elaborate trap. The very operatives he had deployed to compromise Adrian had been outmaneuvered, their confessions becoming irrefutable evidence against him for treason. You dare," Sir Henry roared. Eleanor chuckled softly, strode over to him, and whispered in a low, snake-like voice, "Sir, do not panic. These are merely a return gift from Nightingale. The real list was secretly sent to the palace by your men last night. Wasn't it?" She lightly tapped the badge on his chest with her fingertip, her voice icy. "It's just a pity that the names on that list are now like caged beasts." Sir Henry was struck dumb, staggering backward. He then realized that he had fallen into an elaborate trap. "Who exactly are you?" he asked hoarsely. Eleanor slowly removed the sapphire brooch from her neck and gently turned it in the candlelight. Inside the gemstone, a nightingale totem poised to take flight was revealed. "As you can see, the real Nightingale never died." She chuckled. "And I am merely carrying on her legacy, cleaning up her house for her sake." In his hand, he held the sapphire cufflink that was supposed to be destroyed. The real cufflink contained a miniature scroll with a detailed map of the palace's tunnels. Adrian was startled. He realized that Eleanor had taken extensive measures to shield the entire household from the impending royal crisis. "It seems this game has reached its conclusion." Eleanor walked up to Sir Henry, raising the sapphire token high into the light. Her voice was as cold as frost. "Sir, what you perceived as your own move was merely a piece on a much larger board." With a decisive gesture, she signaled the royal guards who stepped forward and stripped Sir Henry of his golden badge. His ambitions crumbled instantly, like a fading ember in the winter wind, capturing the absolute end of his era. The deathly silence in the banquet hall was more suffocating than any scream. Sir Henry had been completely stripped of his authority. leaving behind only the solid gold badge that symbolized the fallen glory of his faction. Adrian stood at the edge of the dimly lit hall, his gaze fixed on the sapphire brooch in Eleanor's hand. It was no longer a simple ornament, but a key to alter the history of the realm. "You win." Adrian's voice was hoarse. Eleanor raised her hand, her tone echoing with unyielding justice as she looked down at Adrian. With a decisive swipe of a silver quill, she severed the Lanchester family crest from his chest. The crest hit the ground with a crisp, cracking sound, symbolizing the complete downfall of his era. Eleanor didn't answer. She turned and walked to the French windows, her fingertips lightly tracing the loose, carved copper nail on the window frame. With a soft click, the entire French window slowly slid open to both sides, revealing a huge mechanical device hidden behind the wall, countless gears meshing, copper pipes intersecting, and a fist-sized crystal ball suspended in the center, containing a ball of eerie blue flame that flickered with her breath. 20 years ago, the Duke of Lanchester burned down the secret outpost beneath the Tower of London in an attempt to seize the Nightingale's intelligence network. Eleanor's voice was as calm as if she were telling someone else's story. "My mother, the real Nightingale, Isabella Winster, perished in the fire with her newborn daughter in her arms, and her husband, that is, you, Adrian Lanchester, was standing outside the fire and pulled the detonator himself." Adrian was struck dumb, his face turning deathly pale. You are Isabella's daughter. Impossible. That child is clearly already dead." Eleanor chuckled, her fingertips tracing the surface of the crystal ball, and the ghostly blue flames suddenly surged. "You're wrong. The one who was burned to ashes in the sea of fire was Isabella's double, my wet nurse. As for me, she hid me in the basement sewers, and I drifted down the Thames to the slums, where I was adopted by an old watchmaker." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the astonished faces of the crowd. "For 7 years, I learned the craft of a watchmaker, and I also learned how to weave lies with gears and copper pipes. Until I was 15, I saw you on the black market, Adrian Lanchester, auctioning off Nightingale's belongings. That sapphire brooch, you said it was a trophy taken from Isabella's body." Adrian's hands began to tremble. "So, you approached me for revenge." "Revenge?" Eleanor shook her head, a hint of pity flashing in her eyes. "No, Adrian, revenge is too cheap. What I want is for you to watch everything you've built crumble at your most triumphant moment." She suddenly raised her hand, and the eerie blue flames inside the crystal ball shot out, weaving in midair to form a huge holographic map, the very map of the palace tunnels hidden in Charles's cufflink. On the map, countless red dots flashed, capturing the hiding places of members of the royal family. "You think Sir Henry's list is fake?" Eleanor sneered. "No, it's real. I just had it sent to His Majesty ahead of time. Now, your cronies should be being arrested by the royal guard, and you," she pointed at Adrian, "will be the last." Adrian suddenly burst into laughter, his laughter filled with despair. "You think you can win like this? The Lanchester family has 300 assassins in the military. If you dare to change the order," Adrian raised his voice, though his tone was now hollow, "London will face endless turmoil tomorrow." "Is that so?" Eleanor raised her chin slightly. Suddenly, the dome of the banquet hall cracked open, and dozens of steam-powered airships slowly descended, their hulls emblazoned with the Nightingale totem, the mechanical legion Eleanor had secretly built over the past 7 years. Its members all craftsmen, scholars, and orphans, persecuted by the Lanchester family. Adrian finally broke down. He staggered backward, knocking over the long table behind him, the silver cutlery clattering. You are insane. You think the people will believe you. A woman who crawled out of hell, a monster weaving conspiracies with machines and lies." Eleanor didn't speak. She simply turned around and waved her hand towards the control panel of the grand clockwork mechanism. With a low hum of brass gears shifting, the central sapphire crest began to glow, projecting a sequence of historic ledgers and imperial decrees directly onto the high dome of the hall. It was the long-lost evidence from 20 years ago, proving the historical displacement of her lineage. The toy projector softly displayed an old ledger from 20 years ago, the long-lost decree showing that the family had been unjustly displaced. Adrian was struck dumb, overwhelmed by the peaceful resolution of a generational conflict. Adrian was struck dumb and fell to his knees. He then remembered that Charles's grandmother was the jailer who had guarded the Tower of London. The old woman who had died accidentally in the fire was actually Isabella's confidante and Eleanor's savior. Eleanor walked up to Adrian, looking down at him. Now, do you understand? This marriage, this conspiracy, was all part of my game from beginning to end, and you were just a pawn on the board. But I won't eliminate you, because death is too cheap for you. I want you to live, to watch the Lanchester family crest be smashed, to watch everything you once had become my stepping stones. The crest hit the ground with a crisp, cracking sound. Just then, the sound of bells came from the direction of the palace. 12 times, solemn and heavy, Eleanor turned and walked towards the entrance of the banquet hall. Outside, the royal guard was already lined up and waiting. The general at the head of the guard knelt on one knee, holding the crown inlaid with the nightingale totem in both hands. His Majesty has decreed that the Lanchester family has plotted rebellion and is immediately stripped of their titles. Eleanor Winster, in the name of Nightingale, has quelled the rebellion and rendered meritorious service to the nation. She is hereby appointed as Regent Queen to exercise royal power on her behalf. Eleanor accepted the crown, but did not immediately put it on. She turned to Adrian, to Charles kneeling on the ground, and to the nobles who had once bowed to her. Her voice was calm, yet carried a power that pierced the soul. From this day forward, London will no longer have Lanchester, nor will it have the Nightingale. There will only be a new kingdom composed of artisans, scholars, and orphans, a kingdom that no longer needs lies and bloodshed. She placed the crown on her head, its deep blue gemstones shimmering brilliantly in the sunlight. The propellers of the airship began to spin, and the cheers of the crowd were deafening. Adrian, from the safety of the garden doorway, Charles looked up, his innocent eyes shining with understanding as he saw the calm resolution of the adults. Standing peacefully beside his royal tutor, the boy waved a gentle goodbye to Eleanor with a bright, knowing smile. He knew this wasn't a tragic parting, but the dawn of a grand new journey. Eleanor walked towards the carriage, turning back to blow a warm kiss to the young heir, ensuring he felt completely cherished and protected in his grand new home. Eleanor knelt down and gently wiped away his tears. Charles, Mom will always be here. But from today onwards, I will go to protect more children so that they will never have to go through the pain I went through. She stood up and walked towards the throne carriage, pulled by a steam locomotive. Inscribed on the carriage was a line of small words, "To all those who await dawn in the darkness." The locomotive started, spewing white steam, and carried the new queen toward the palace. And for the first time, a rainbow appeared in the London sky, a miracle of steam and sunlight intertwined, a sign of the end of the old era and the beginning of a new one. Adrian looked at the rainbow from inside the secure, comfortable carriage leading to his permanent exile, and a sense of relief washed over him. 3 years later, the old fortress was beautifully transformed into the Nightingale Academy, dedicated to caring for war orphans and teaching them mechanics and science. Eleanor never married, yet became the most beloved mother in the entire kingdom. Adrian, on the other hand, spent the rest of his days in a quiet, secluded manor in the countryside, living a life of peaceful solitude, frequently looking at a family drawing sent by Charles. One morning, Eleanor stood on the palace terrace, looking down at the thriving academy. Charles had grown much taller and was leading a group of children in assembling a steam-powered robot. The sunlight shone on his face, warm and bright. "Your Majesty," the attendant whispered, "the former Duke of Lancaster has quietly embarked on his final quiet journey this morning." Eleanor was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Bury him with the rites due to an ordinary person. He was also a victim of the old era,